I'm going to move on to Hannah. Hannah Hassan, who's from the university, is a university student in Edinburgh, fighting for better COVID protections at the university, and a member of the Zerocovid Scotland organising group. Over to you, Hannah. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. So I really just want to talk to you for a short while about my own experience of this stage of the pandemic and why I think the current approach to living with COVID is quite damaging and that we need a new approach. I think it's important to share this because the problem with pandemic policies so far is that they've not really considered a lot of people's lived experiences. And I think that's because some voices are not as loud as others and seen as not as important either. So I'll just start by saying I've got type 1 diabetes. It's an autoimmune condition where the body attacks itself, attacks the perfectly healthy cells in the pancreas. So people with type 1 diabetes can sometimes overreact to infections and get more seriously ill. Even if we have well-controlled diabetes, we do have higher blood sugar levels, which damages our cells, meaning that vascular complications in later life are very common. This is why type 1 was put on the higher risk list. Now, I'm not a scientist, but many of them are now suggesting that COVID and long COVID are affecting the vascular system. And while nothing is that certain yet about long COVID, I feel like it is quite necessary for me as a type 1 to avoid COVID to protect my long-term health with diabetes. My own diagnosis of type 1 was probably a post-viral thing from when I had another virus previously and I struggled to get better. And this just really reinforces that risk of what COVID could potentially do to me, even if it's not guaranteed. And yet, because only 10% of all diabetics are type 1, people often misunderstand what it is and the fact that it's actually quite a serious illness. There's a lot of stigma around all the different kinds of diabetes, which often deters people from speaking about it and from raising concerns about COVID safety in relation to it. So there's not much evidence that COVID will be worse for us, and there's not much recognition of the seriousness of type 1. And at a time when COVID is being talked about as mild, it's made raising concerns at my university a bit of a nightmare. So after going back to uni after Christmas during the Omicron wave, a number of courses were no longer offering online options. And this was to be the plan before Omicron hit, but no changes were made by the university in light of it. They were going to go ahead with increasing the frequency and the quantity of people on campus together, despite Omicron. They had us in smaller classrooms than we had been, so no social distancing, no additional ventilation measures put in place, and certain buildings don't even have windows that can be opened. And nobody even seems to be monitoring the use of space in like eating areas or the flow of people throughout the day and whether even people are wearing their masks properly or not. So after about a week of asking if adjustments could be made for me so that I could attend my classes from home, it became quite clear that increasing everyone's time on campus was a university-wide policy. Staff had been advised that they must now offer a component of the course in person and that this would not be optional. Now, blanket policies are always indirect discrimination, and this was going to seriously affect the transmission levels on campus for staff and for students. So I just decided to make a complaint about it. But unfortunately, I don't really think they've taken it that seriously. In response to my complaint, I was told to explain the exact increased risk to COVID with medical evidence that I have. I was asked for tangible examples where I believed health and safety and equality duties were not being met. When I asked to see the risk assessments and equality impact assessments, I was told I could go and make a freedom of information request. And I was asked to provide details of the exact people I'd discussed my concerns with before I complained. Now, these are totally unreasonable requests, which I feel like are tactics designed to put me off complaining, to make me feel guilty about complaining, for dropping staff members in it when they were only trying to help me and answer my questions. In doing this, they're trying to ignore that I'm complaining about the university's management decisions and that I'm not complaining about the already exhausted staff that are in an impossible situation themselves. you'll all notice how they've been on strike recently over pay and conditions. So to me, the response from the uni is just gaslighting of the highest order. They've really made me feel like I'm being a troublemaker, an inconvenience, and that I'm some sort of outlier on the periphery with some mad idea. But this is not mad. The pandemic is not over yet, and we now have the highest cases of COVID to date. And asking to attend my classes online is actually not unreasonable at all. In fact, most other Scottish universities are doing exactly that. So it's just hypocrisy that anybody can remove the choice for people who want to engage with their education online and at the same time acknowledge that the pandemic isn't over and just accept that staff and students will be catching COVID on their premises as inevitable. Universities are workplaces too. So probably don't need to explain how this has been difficult to deal with. I've sort of not been able to fully focus on my studying or my job because I'm worried all the time. I worked really hard doing an access course just to get into uni, and I'm not sure if I want to continue if the situation doesn't improve. Last time I checked, this was not the purpose of higher education, which I thought was going to be a lot more liberating and empowering than it has been so far. But what's also been difficult is how exhausting it is to make complaints like these and sort of advocate for yourself all of the time. It is so frustrating when you explain to people what your concerns are and the immediate response to you is that COVID is mild now, or have you had your booster or something. People say to me quite a lot that they don't really care about COVID anymore and that it's now more important for them to do what they want for their own mental health. Now, I'm sure that has some basis, but I don't think the thousands of people with long COVID would agree with that. They wouldn't agree that COVID is mild or that by being exposed to this virus, it somehow allowed them to safeguard their own mental health in any way. For me, it's not limiting my social contacts that's affected my mental health. It's the constant worry about the high levels of COVID and the long-term harm it's doing, the sort of gaslighting and not being listened to or taken seriously, and just constantly being told what's best for me by non-disabled people that don't even care about COVID anymore. But I do think it is so important to go through this really uncomfortable process of challenging people and policies, not just for me, but for the benefit of others too. There will be countless others that share these concerns and maybe don't speak up about it. And I admit that I'm in a privileged position to be able to challenge things on disability grounds. But the point is the risk is there for everyone. And I do recognise that people without increased risk to COVID at the moment don't really have much clout in terms of challenging employers or anybody else. But these policies still affect all of us, whether or not we're disabled. COVID and long COVID are a possibility for all of us. So what we really need to do is show our solidarity to the people that are the most at risk. And we need to show our employers and institutions that we want health and safety for everyone to start coming first, because it will benefit everyone. So I just want to give one example of this. There's a coffee shop near my house who, from the very start of the pandemic, decided they would do takeaway only at the window indefinitely. They made an independent choice to adapt their business model to prioritise the health and safety of staff, despite the government guidance. Their workers don't have to worry about being put at risk or posing a risk to anybody else. They're just living proof of what could and should be done to ensure that people can work and enjoy things without compromising their health. It shows that employers can and should be going beyond the absolute failure that is the government guidance and still continue to trade and earn money and enjoy these things that a lot of us just don't feel safe enough doing right now. So we've always had this culture of assessing and mitigating against risk. And employers do this to make sure that it's safe, accessible and viable for a diversity of people and to avoid liability. Why is COVID being treated any different? So I'm just going to finish now by saying that if you are maybe thinking about doing something or speaking out, if you can, do it. If you know somebody who is, show them your support. With the end of the last protections that we have keeping us safe, we can't afford to be quiet right now. We can't hope to change anything if we don't do it together. So you go ahead and write that letter or arrange that meeting or even launch a complaint as well. And if you can, please have those difficult conversations and show people that there is a way to turn this around without a lockdown, using just the simple, non-invasive measures that we already know work. That's me. Thanks.